The amount of power that one person has is completely useless if they don't surround themselves with the right people. Power is a core element in Mob Psycho, and the way that people use their power and grow in it is a significant way in which they are shown to change. And in one of my personal favorite episodes that I watched pretty recently, recency bias, we're able to see what Mob, the main character of the show, would do without those people that surround him and that help him control his powers. But before we hop into talking about that episode and the philosophy of the main villain of it, Mogami, let's give you a little bit of a recap of the show so far. Mob Psycho 100 is about a kid, Mob, with insane power, and is considered by the people who know him to be the most powerful psychic in the world. But he's just a kid, and after searching for someone to teach him how to control his power, he meets Reagan, a man who calls himself a psychic, but mostly just helps with the people who are crazy and lets Mob handle the actual real problems. On one of those outings, we met Dimple, a spirit who Mob had to exorcise, but Dimple was actually pretty okay, and somehow he came back, and now he's like a mainstay on the show, trying to help Mob unlock his latent powers. And by latent powers, I mean, when Mob reaches 100% of this little bar that you'll see throughout the show, he reaches his quote-unquote latent powers, where he basically loses consciousness and gains full control of his psychic abilities, basically tearing through anything that even attempts to take him down. Along with these characters, we now have Mob's brother Ritsu, who previously spatted with Mob in the first season, but they're fine now and pretty much best friends. There's also the Body Improvement Club, a group of guys who push Mob to become stronger as he tries to gain more physical strength, and Tsubomi, the girl that Mob has liked for quite a while now. You've now been recapped. Let's hop into the episode. At this current time, Dimple is staying in a run-down warehouse where a group of other spirits are also staying, and one day, a random psychic comes in to try and exorcise them. The spirits are very cocky, thinking they can take him down, but he absolutely demolishes them, and he begins to absorb their powers. We now hop back to present day, where Reagan is taking a Mob to a new job that he's found for a rich guy. This guy has hired the best psychics in the area to help purge his daughter of an evil spirit. And after some disputes, Reagan is able to be the first person to go in and try and exorcise her. This is a moment where Reagan shows some smarts. While all the other psychics are looking for an energy or telltale signs of a spirit, Reagan's actually just listening while he has a conversation with this little girl. Although every other psychic says that this is just a normal girl with a crazy dad who's locked her up in his room, Reagan points out some inconsistencies in the conversation they had. Finally, the actual spirit reveals himself as part of the girl, and Dimple freaks out, revealing that this is the spirit from the beginning of the episode. Surprise, surprise. A man who used to be a famous psychic named Mogami, who Reagan actually took some inspiration from. While also being a public psychic, Mogami was a hitman, eventually both exorcising spirits from reality and killing people caught up to his consciousness, and he killed himself. At least this is what Dimple assumes. Even though Dimple continuously tries to make them leave, both Mob and Reagan disagree, continuing to watch psychics as they try and exorcise her. All of the psychics fail miserably until one of them puts Mogami in a hold. Mogami then describes this girl's body as a doll and begins to contort it and disjoint her fingers as though he's about to attack. But in that moment, Mob finally steps up. After a moment of fighting, Mob fails, and Mogami is able to almost completely join inside this girl. Mob then realizes the best way to try and save the girl is by going into the spirit of her and fighting Mogami from the inside. But in doing so, he will have to abandon his body. So he decides that he's going to let Dimple take over. Reagan doesn't really trust Dimple because Dimple's been very open about how he wants to help Mob unlock his latent powers and take over his body, but Mob trusts him, and so Dimple does take over, and we get a actually really cool hand-to-hand fight, which is weird because we never see Mob do a hand-to-hand fight. And it's very well animated, personal opinion. During the fight, Mob is able to enter the spirit of Minori, who I should say is the girl. I'm genuinely surprised I have not used her name up to this point. Now Mob actually is able to see Mogami for what he looks like. The first thing Mob actually notes is how human he looks. The main part of season 1 was how Mob has been taught and adheres to never using his power on other humans. And in a minute, Mogami will definitely take advantage of Mob's hesitation. They talk for a moment, and Mogami tells Mob that he will not be forced out, and contorts his face into a more evil looking, provoking Mob and Mogami to fight. After a moment, Mob takes the upper hand and shoots Mogami, coming out as a tattered body torn to shreds in what is, I'm pretty sure, the most amount of blood that has ever been shown in the entire season. Mob has a moment of hesitation where he has to remind himself that, yeah, this is a spirit. But in that moment, Mogami takes advantage. He scales Mob's power to what Mob believe he actually has, which is none. And then Mogami places Mob in a world where he has no powers. In this world, everyone is a realistic representation of how they would act, and there are only two differences. Number one, Mob has no powers, and number two, Mogami didn't try and possess this girl. These changes have a ripple effect that doesn't necessarily change the world too much, but it changes Mob's life significantly. Mob's power is what has gained him most of his friends. He met Reagan under the pretenses of controlling his power. He met Dimple as one of the spirits Mob attempted to exorcise. He joined the Body Improvement Club so that he could become better at physical strength and try to impress Tsubomi. His brother looks up to him because of his power and because of how he restrains himself from using it. The last kicker of this new world is the adding of Minori, the girl that Mob is currently trying to save. She is shown to be a real pain in the ass, tormenting Mob in order to secure her position. Along with that, Mob is abandoned by people that in the real world would have helped him, and he is left completely alone. The reason Mogami does this is to convert Mob into his quote-unquote sympathizer. This is where we're going to talk about Mogami's philosophy. First off, it's backstory time. Everything Mogami says is very similar to what Dimple told us earlier. The only difference is why he became a hitman. His mother got sick, and being a psychic didn't really help pay the bills, so he decided being a hitman was the next best thing. But even after taking all those jobs and trying to make more money, she still died. And after she died, she came back as an evil spirit to tell him that what he had been doing with his life and his jobs, those spirits followed him and were the ones that made her sick and killed her. Now, we're not shown it, but it can be presumed that he had to either exorcise this spirit or absorb this power. And I don't know about you, but personally, if I had to kill my mother in spirit form after I'm the one that caused her death, I think that would cause some psychological problems. After he attempts to become stronger by absorbing a lot of spirits, he then kills himself to become an evil spirit and cause everyone that uses others to feel pain. Mogami lightly takes blame for himself, saying that he should have thought about what he was doing in his life, but he mostly just shifts the blame to other people and how they used him. Mogami sees people as only being able to use others, and therefore they're evil, and therefore they need to be punished, especially the people who have a lot of money and significant power. But Mogami is very hypocritical in this. By taking up all this power from those evil spirits, Mogami has made himself powerful, and he is now using a girl's body and is calling it a doll that he is controlling. By placing Mob in a world full of people who use and abandon him, he believes that Mob will begin to see the world in the same way. After a wall broke down and other psychics began to leave, Dimple tells Reagan that Mob lost while inside, and they should probably leave. But Reagan disagrees, telling him that Mob placed his trust in them, and especially in Dimple giving him his body, so they need to stay. After a moment of lying to himself about why he's doing it, Dimple agrees and decides that waiting from the outside won't help, so he enters the spirit of Minori. Back in the dream, Mob has now lived here for 6 months, with no powers, constant bullying, and no one to help him. We cut back to him feeding a cat, but then Minori and her group of friends arrive, telling Mob that it's a disservice to the community, and then they decide to beat him up. In this moment of pain and anger, Mogami gives Mob his powers back. Mob wipes out this entire group of kids and tells Minori that she needs to apologize and leave him alone. A kid appears from behind Mob telling him that he should just die, and he hits Mob with a book, which gives me what I think might be one of the most disturbing scenes in the entire show so far.
お前なんか死ねばいい。 僕があんたらに何をしたって言うんだ。さっぱりわからない。でもわからなくてもいい。どうでもいい。完成だ。やっと変わってくれた。
Right before Mob kills this kid, Dimple finally arrives, adding a literal new color range to the life inside of this dream. He then reminds Mob of the people in the real world who support him, all of those people giving Mob a moment of realization as he remembers who they are. Mogami still stands that this world has changed Mob's outlook. And Mob agrees. The people he has surrounded himself with have made him stronger, and he has been allowed to change into a better person than he would have been if he hadn't had them. This is the core conflict between these two characters. Mogami believes that others are only capable of bringing each other down, himself being a representation of that. And Mob sees that others can help and support each other. But Mob is now also able to see that people can fail, and this causes him to appreciate the people around him more. The only thing left is an argument Mogami made in the previous episode.
霊能力や超能力がどこから湧いて出るか知ってるか。感情だよ。すべては感情が生むものだ。ではここで問題だ。幸せに暮らしている人間と苦しみにもがいている人間、どちらの方が強い感情が育つと思う？正解は後者。より強いのは負の感情だ。
And since psychic powers come from emotions, Mogami believes that due to his anger and disgust, he should still be more powerful than Mob. So they fight, with Mob already crushing the spirits that Mogami is sending at him. But he gets caught and eaten by one of the spirits, where he sees all of the pain and torment that other people constantly suffer. And for a moment, he doubts that he can actually do it. But then he remembers that he's here to save a girl. And he instantly reaches 100% of his power, but stays in full control, becoming weirdly attractive. Can I say that? You'll put that in the edit, Silas, we'll find out. Another thing I want to add is I find it very cool that of this world that's completely black and white, Mogami's red hue to his psychic powers and Mob's blue hue to his psychic powers both light up this world in a completely new way, showing that everything isn't as bland as Mogami believes it is. Mob beats Mogami, but doing this unleashes all of the spirits that Mogami had taken in up to this point. Mob tells Dimple that he can defeat them and that he will be outside soon. And he does pretty well, but eventually there are just too many, and he's almost forced out. But in that moment, Mob's spirit body is shattered, and we're shown a form in which he has an unknown amount of power. While in this state, he is able to save the girl and evict Mogami from the body. Once outside, the first thing Mob does is ask if Minori is okay. Before he's able to find out, Mogami leaves her body and says that he'll be watching Mob, trying to see if he made the right choice. But then he's trapped by this guy who doesn't really matter except as a way to bring Mogami back later, which happens, but we don't really need to get into that because it doesn't change much. Anyways, Minori wakes up, completely remembering the dream, and she somewhat jokingly tells Mob that she's sorry for everything that happened, as the dream was completely a realistic depiction of her. But then, after slightly walking away, she breaks down and starts telling him how truly sorry she was. But Mob forgives her, and he sums up basically the lesson of these entire 2 episodes.
人は変われるってこと。最上さんと朝霧さんが教えてくれたんだ。僕もみんなに変えてもらった。僕も誰かを変えられるかもしれないって分かったから。こうやって会えてよかったよ。
ありがとう。
Mob Psycho is a show about growing as a person and helping others even when they seem like they might not deserve it. And from episode 1 of this show to episode 4 and 5 of this season, we've been able to see how Mob has grown from a kid who had no friends and had barely any control over his powers up to 100% to a kid who now is able to stay fully conscious, 100% of his power, and also knows that the people he has surrounded himself with make him even stronger than he would have been without them. There's an entire season left of the show and about 7 episodes left of this season that I have not talked about at all, so you should go check those out. Anyways, I have been your host, Silas Jackson. This has been Recency Bias, and I hope to see you guys again next week. Later.